So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Welcome to our webinar for Laudato Si Circle Leaders, Tips and Tricks. My name is Christina Leaño, and I serve as Associate Director for the Global Catholic Climate Movement, and delighted to welcome you to our webinar today. So the agenda for today is we're going to begin with a prayer and a reflection. And the prayer and reflection have two purposes today. One is to, of course, lead us into a time of prayer, but also to serve as an example of some of the principles for the 4 C's of facilitating the Laudato Si Circle. So it's both a way of prayer, but also a way to learn. So we're going to begin with that. And then I'm really delighted with our 2 guest speakers today. We have Vivek DaSilva, who is going to speak on generative conversations. And then we have Vivek's coming from Dublin, Ireland. And then we have Barbara Deck of Boston, who's going to talk about using dyads. So those are 2 examples of ways to facilitate conversation in circles. And then we'll have time for question and answers, and we'll end by the top of the hour. And just a reminder that if you do want to put anything in the chat that you want everybody to see it, make sure that in your chat there's a little blue kind of oval where you can change from who you're directing the message to. So many of you have been writing messages to all panelists, but if you want everybody on the webinar to see, make sure to click all panelists and attendees. But I want to note that it's great to see people here from Pennsylvania, the United States, the Philippines, Scotland, England, Assisi, France. So wonderful to have this global audience. So as we enter this time of this webinar and this time of prayer, I invite you just to take a moment to remember that we're in the presence of a loving Creator. And our prayer today comes from the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur and is inspired by St. Francis's Canticle of the Creatures and the 4 elements. And so I'll read from a passage from Laudato Si. The entire material universe speaks of God's love, God's boundless affection for us. Soil, water, mountains, everything is, as it were, a caress of God. The history of our friendship with God is always linked to particular places which take on an intensely personal meaning. We all remember places, and revisiting those memories does us much good. So take a moment now as we reflect on Mother Earth by pressing your feet into the ground. Become aware of the earth beneath your feet and marvel and be grateful for the nourishment you receive from our Mother, Sister Earth. We move to the element of air. Again from Laudato Si. We have forgotten that we ourselves are dust of the earth. Our very bodies are made up of her elements. We breathe her air, and we receive life and refreshment from her waters. Become conscious of your breathing. And be aware that the breath, the air you are breathing, is the same air shared by all past generations and future generations. And offer a prayer of gratitude for the gift of air. We move to the element of fire. Climate change is a global problem with grave implications: environmental, social, economic, political, and for the distribution of goods. It represents one of the principal challenges facing humanity in our day. From Laudato Si. Open and close your hands, aware that our ability to do so is fueled by the sun's energy that is captured by the plant life that we eat. Rejoice in the energy of the sun and resolve to use your energy to face climate change. And finally, we move to the element of water. From Laudato Si. Access to safe drinkable water is a basic and universal human right, since it is essential to human survival, and as such, is a condition for the exercise of other human rights. Our world has a grave social debt towards the poor who lack access to drinking water because they are denied the right to a life consistent with their inalienable dignity. Breathe again deeply, taking in molecules of water that have also passed through the bodies of all breathing creatures. Be grateful for the gift of water and resolve to use it with reverence and justice. So take a moment now in silence just to reflect. What did you notice when you were meditating on the 4 elements? And after a moment of reflection, you're invited to share your response in the chat box. We'll just take 15 more seconds in silence. And you're welcome to continue putting your reflection in the chat. So we give thanks to God for the elements that support our life and all life. Amen. So thank you for participating in that prayer and entering into that time of reflection. And I appreciate what people have shared in the chat. And I love that reflection, and also think it's a great way to highlight some key principles that you might consider using when you're facilitating Laudato Si circles. And I have them as 4 C's: contemplative, creation, cultivating community, and calm. So we'll go through those. So the first thing is the importance of creating a contemplative environment. As we all know, we live in such a busy world, and yet Laudato Si calls us to slow down, to be present, and to be alive and awake to God within us and around us, in people and through creation. And so what's an important element in Laudato Si circles is to nurture that contemplative space. As we did in that prayer, we began with some silence. There was time for reflection. And I think that's one thing that's really important for circles, is to not be afraid of silence and those lulls. And I know Vivek will be speaking a little bit more about that today. So practical ways that you can cultivate a contemplative space. You can have music playing as people are coming into the meeting room. You can have an altar or a sacred piece in the center, just to create that sacred container. You can invite people to put away their cell phones as a way to be fully present. And just as we did slightly with this at this beginning, is begin with silence. And there's many forms of meditation. There's centering prayer, there's Christian meditation, there's prayer of the breath. And so even to take 1 or 2 minutes just to begin with silence. And so the other piece I think that can really create that contemplative space is time for reflection and sharing. So just like what we did, you pose a question and you invite people just to reflect. And the other thing that I really liked about the prayer earlier is that it brought in the body. And that is another important way to foster a contemplative space, because we can only be in the body now. You can't be in it in the future. It can only be now. And so to invite people to feel the ground beneath them, to breathe, just to be aware of sensations on the skin is another way, just to kind of invite people back into the present moment, knowing how scattered we are. And so creating this contemplative space isn't just about kind of this formal silent prayer, but can be a way of being that just invites spaciousness and silence throughout the whole gathering. So the other thing that we like to encourage for Laudato Si circles, and something that I think is unique to what we try to do, is to be in creation, to pray in creation as much as possible. And we know in Laudato Si, Pope Francis talks about that, using the example of St. Francis, you know, par excellence, communing with creation, talking with the birds. It's evident in his canticle for creatures. And so in the Laudato Si circle, if you can, be outside and spend a little bit of time in creation. And I'm part of the circle with Barbara, and in Boston, what we do is an exercise called Linger, Listen, and Love, where people are invited at the beginning of the circle to go outside and to linger out, you know, if they are walking around and noticing if they're lingering and there's something catches their attention, like this flower that this girl is smelling, and then to listen to it, to actually be in dialogue with the flower and see, is God speaking to you through this beautiful piece of creation? And then to love it is to give some kind of prayer or offering, but it's a way of praying with creation. Another circle in Rome, and Antonio, I think you've probably attended one of these, is to actually have an outdoor mass. So the Laudato Si circle in Rome actually has a monthly mass outside, and that's another beautiful way of being in communion with creation. But if you can't be outside for the weather or for whatever purpose, and I saw somebody in here was in a basement, I mean, we are creation. Creation is all around us. And so even just bringing attention to the elements is a way to kind of reconnect with this reality that we are in, when we are of creation. Or you can actually bring in a plant. I did a retreat once where we brought in plants into the space and spoke and were praying with the plants that were there with us. So there's different ways to incorporate creation, but it is a really important piece of Laudato Si circles is trying to find a way to rekindle that way of prayer that is so much a part of our Christian tradition. So the third C is about cultivating community. And you know, the thing about Laudato Si circles is that we're really trying to build localized, in-person, as much as possible communities. And so part of that is being aware of what's going to nurture that. What's the space? Are you in a circle? Are you eating over a meal? And these are all pictures from circles. So what are the ways? Can you have name tags? Can you have a time for people to introduce themselves and for people to have informal sharing to get to know one another? But this isn't just about kind of, we have this extractivist mentality, in modern day of just trying to get information, as opposed to the circles are trying to change that by having a paradigm of mutuality and intimacy. And so what are the ways to do that? And so some ways to cultivate that inclusive community, and also for managing conversations, which can be challenging sometimes, perhaps in your Laudato Si Circle. And I just wanted to offer some tips. Is one, of course, just to prepare an agenda, just to be prepared and to be aware of like how much time you want to spend on each piece. Being flexible, but being able to kind of have a sense of the flow and the direction that you hope that the circle will take. And that way you can make sure that there's enough space for everybody to participate. The second is to name the expectation of inclusivity. Things change when you name that the purpose and the hope of your time together as a circle is to build inclusive and intimate community. And that can be helped also by creating guidelines, community guidelines. It can depend on the kind of sharing that you're going to do, and both Vivek and Barbara will be sharing different ways of doing that. But for instance, in some groups that I'm a part of, when there's contemplative sharing, there's an invitation to not crosstalk. It's really just a chance for people to reflect, but not for people to respond to it. But for more open discussions, there might be guidelines such as, be fully present, or step up, step back, meaning if you normally talk a lot, if you normally don't talk a lot, to step up. But if you do talk a lot, step back. Or assume the good. And that's another great principle of assuming the good in other people. So having community guidelines of how you want to relate together in the space can be really helpful to have a shared understanding of just ways of relating. Another important way to manage conversations is to model. So if you're going to do a reflection and ask a question, to be the first one to answer, or to have somebody respond, to model like the length of time that you're hoping people will share and what's appropriate. But that modeling can really help to shape the conversation, not to force people to do it in a certain way, but just to create that template to facilitate everybody speaking. And of course, as a facilitator, you want to notice who is speaking and who isn't, and to invite those who aren't gently, create the space and make sure you invite them to speak. I know for myself as an introvert, sometimes I need that extra push from somebody to just say, hey, Christina, did you have anything you wanted to say? And that is enough just to create that space for me. The other thing is you might want to invite different ways of communicating. So some people are verbal, some people like to write. So having, reflection, having silence, and then we'll hear later on other ways of having structured forms of communication to ensure everybody has something to say, has a chance to say something. And then the last thing is, of course, if you have community guidelines, you can always return to them. So if you notice that there's somebody who just seems to have a lot to say, you can just remember, remind the group that, just a reminder that we hope everybody can share. And if you notice you're speaking a lot, or to notice who else is in the room hasn't spoken, and to create space for them. And so there's ways to do this to make sure that everybody feels comfortable speaking. So these are some tips. So again, we have the three of the four C's so far are for facilitating the Laudato Si Circle are contemplative, bringing in that contemplative. 2 is bringing in creation. 3, cultivating community. And then the fourth one, which I think is the most important, is to stay calm and to trust God. I think that's one of the most important things for anybody facilitating or doing retreat work, is just to remember that your energy and how you present yourself actually has more of an impact than anything you might say. And to trust that God is working through you and all shall be well, and just to relax is really the most important thing, and to trust yourself to facilitate a circle well. So those are the 4 C's: contemplative, creation, community, and calm, that are principles to think about when you're facilitating your circle. And as a side note, we'll be sharing all PowerPoints to the participants. So you'll be receiving an email with all this information in case you're wondering. So I am now delighted to turn the mic over to Vivek DaSilva, who is, again, coming from Dublin and works with Veritas Press. And also he works with the Laudato Si working group of the Bishops' Conference. And we were together in Dublin at the World Meeting of Families last year, so it was a delight to meet him there. And so he's been part of a reflection group on the new story since 2014. And I'm really delighted that now he's going to share an important process that he uses in his reflection group called Generative Conversations. And this is a structure that you might consider using for your circles. So Vivek, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Christina. So good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I'm going to use a slideshow just to help me through the. Is my slideshow visible now?
It is. You might want to play from start.
Yeah. Are we on there now? Yeah.
Perfect. Yes.
So I want to begin with this line from Thomas Berry as the starting point for why we have these conversations. And it's the line that he wrote in one of his books where he says, "We are in between stories. The old story is not functioning properly, and we have not learned the new story." So for us, the reason why we have this conversation, or why we have these conversations, is to listen to what everybody else has to say, because no one person or one group has all of the answer. So that is why, and it's with that mindset that we enter into this conversation. And the group that I'm part of began because we were all struggling with the information that we were getting about the new story and the new universe story, and how that was impacting on the living out of our Catholic faith. So that is the background to that group. And in the beginning, we kind of focused on different books. It was very kind of a head exercise to live, and it was very much an intellectual exercise. But gradually, we began to feel we needed something more to engage deeply in these conversations. And we asked ourselves the question, how do we converse with each other? What are we actually doing? And we invited various people to speak to us. And one of them was Margaret Benefield, who has a very good process of engaging each other in conversation in groups. But something that we have learned through our own experience is this, that every meeting we check in with each other. We give considerable amount of time to listen to where we are in our daily life. Because we each come to a meeting with our stories, and we recognize that we encounter the Spirit in our daily experience. So we have to remember and remind ourselves constantly that the Spirit speaks to us foremost through our daily experience. And we cannot enter into a group and just put that aside. So we give considerable amount of time when we come into the group to allow people to say, where are you at the moment? What is going on for you? Where are you in your own life? How are you experiencing life at the moment? And when sharing conversation, we allow for a lot of silence. So we begin the meeting with silence, as Christina was saying there. One, to arrive into the room and into the space both physically and mentally. So giving ourselves time to arrive into the room, because we could be all coming at that particular time from very busy lives. So we allow for that silence just to arrive. And that silence gives us the time to in some way bring our thoughts together. So when somebody else is speaking, we are not formulating in our head, what do we want to say next? Because we have done that in our moment of silence. So when somebody else is speaking, we can give our full attention to that person. So we allow for silence between each person sharing as well, so that all of us can truly listen to what is being said. Sometimes when someone speaks, we need to allow that silence for that sharing in some way to land. So, and that is because we remember that the Spirit speaks to us through others. And we really have to be attentive to what is the Spirit saying to me through what the other person is sharing. And when we respond similarly then. Once people have shared, it's not about checking out with each other, but it's more about using phrases or similar to what moved me as I heard you speak, or what I heard you say is, or I was struck by, or as you spoke, I could hear in your voice, the emotion or whatever that is. Because again, we remember that the Spirit speaks through others, through our own self-consciousness. And we need to become aware and conscious of that. So this is what's really kind of helped us. And where is this coming from? It's coming from our engaging more deeply with generative conversations and really studying about and looking at how does this allow us to enter into deep personal sharing. And we have come to this stage, I think, now as a group, after 4 years of being together, or 5 years of being together, to say that we are speaking now more at a heart level. It's not just about sharing ideas anymore. It's genuinely sharing our lives with each other. And we have moved, I think, through these 4 fields of conversation. Where in the beginning, when we met, we were talking nice. We were careful about what we said. We were polite. We were very conscious of what language we used. Are we hurting anyone? Are we using the right language? And then we moved into, okay, we needed to kind of really get serious about stuff. And we began to say, okay, this is what I'm feeling. There was a bit of challenge. There was debate. There was conflict, but not to the extent where we were arguing. But some of the sharings were more about, I don't get this, or this has not been my experience, and what my point of view is. And we got to a point where we're not listening to each other properly. So, and then we moved into a more reflective kind of a dialogue where we began to explore. We used books, we used prayer, and then we began to shift to, can I hear what the other person is really saying? What is the other person teaching me? What is the other person saying to me? What has the other person got to offer to what I have from my own reading and learning and experience and all of that? And gradually now, I think we are exploring the whole concept of generative dialogue, which is more about knowing that when I go into a meeting, while I have my own viewpoints, that I might come out of that meeting with a complete new insight, which I never had before. And that is because I'm opening myself up to listen to what the other person is saying, knowing that the Spirit is working through other people. Not because I believe in that they are more capable or more intelligent or more learned than I am, but because through that person, the Spirit is speaking to me. And I think that's how it's allowed us to enter into these conversations in a way that is that's allowed each of us to grow. And what I have noticed as a result, we have all become gentler in our conversations. And our meetings have got shorter, but our sharings have more.
I think he might be having some internet issues. Vivek, we're losing you a little. If you're there, I'm going to turn off your video because sometimes that helps with the bandwidth.
One is slow down and notice. Have I gone off screen here now?
I turned off your video because we lost your, we couldn't hear you. I think there's a problem with the internet, but we can still see your slides.
Okay, so you can hear me also?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay, so the thing is to kind of slow down, notice what is present, and that is what I meant by saying when we came into a meeting, we used to take time to get in touch with each other and with ourselves, and that was the idea of slowing down. So becoming present to what is in me. The other one was, okay, let me just go through these slides and we'll move through them, and you can look at them at your own time later, maybe in more detail. So slow down, notice all that is present, and that is that check-in with each other at the start of a meeting. And it's important to know what story each one brings to a meeting and to listen to each story, because again, as I said, the Spirit is moving through each one individually and is speaking with us. So notice all that is present, because each one is sacred and is precious. The second thing is to listen with all your senses. So when we're conversing with each other, it's to engage fully, present in the body, to listen to the other person. To be fully attentive. So it's not like me putting my head down or closing my eyes and trying to listen to the person, but really engaging the person as the person is speaking. Look at the person. Let the person know that that person is being heard. So listen, watch, observe, be totally present to the speaker. The next one is to listen to the words and the images that the speaker is using, because the speaker has chosen those words deliberately and those images. So to understand what the person is really saying, to appreciate the words chosen, not to get caught in what you think you might be hearing, but to listen genuinely to what the person is saying. So to listen to the words, to the images, what images are being used. Listen to the emotions that are being conveyed by the person talking. What emotion do you sense? Maybe in the tone of voice, the way a person pauses for silence. Do you sense the emotion, the passion, the feeling with which the person is sharing? How do I pay attention to that? The next one would be to suspend judgment. And we have found as a group that this is most difficult because we know each other so well now. And sometimes we tend to finish the other person's sentence before the person doesn't finish the sentence, because we think we know what the person is going to say. So not to make conclusions, not to judge the other person's experience based on your own. And the challenge there is to listen without any sense of bias or prejudice. And believe me, we have found as a group that this is the most difficult one, because we often say to each other, I know what he's going to say, or he always says this, or she always does that. So the challenge was really suspend judgment and to listen genuinely to the person in the present moment and in the now. The next one was to notice what you do not understand in what is being said. Sometimes when we all don't speak the same language and there are different cultures and different nationalities, it's easier to enter into that space to say, I don't think I understand what you're saying. Could you elaborate on that? But when we all speak the same language, it's even more difficult because we assume and we think that this is what the person says. So just to notice what you do not understand in what is being said. What questions are being raised for you as the person is speaking? Or ask yourself the question, am I really hearing what is intended by the speaker? And to seek clarification if you're not sure. If you really think you're missing a point somewhere, to say, I don't think I get this. Can you just elaborate on that? So to really pay attention to what you are hearing and what you think you're understanding. And the last of those then is to notice what you are feeling. As you hear or listen to the person speak, what emotions do you become aware of in yourself? Do you feel yourself getting uneasy, angry, disinterested, disappointed, whatever? And to avoid to respond from that. So to really listen with an open mind and a heart. And this one is linked very closely with the point we made earlier about to suspend judgment when listening to a person. So the 7 principles that I've just spoken about here is what really helped us now to engage with conversations in the group. And what we have really found, what it's done for us is, it has really improved the way we speak and listen to each other. And it has greatly influenced how we engage with each other when we speak about our faith, and how sometimes it's a struggle for us to live our faith in a way that connects with people. So I'll leave it at that. For now, and maybe we can, if there's time for questions afterwards, I'm not sure if Christina, we can kind of address those questions. I'll leave you with this particular slide here. The information that I've used in the slides we've just gone through is given there. And I would then invite you to kind of encourage you to look at some of the work by Margaret Benefiel and take time maybe to listen to those 2 talks by Brené Brown. They're really good talks. The second one is on empathy, and the first one is on vulnerability. Because I think those 2 characteristics are really necessary for us if we are going to engage with each other in a group. We have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and we have to allow ourselves to empathize with the other. So I'll leave it at that, Christina. If that's for now. Is that okay?
That's perfect, Vivek. Thank you so much. I mean, you can really hear in your voice that the principles that you shared and the ways you've used generative conversations comes from the wisdom of your group as it's evolved over these past 4 years. So I think what you shared is relevant for all of us who are looking to deepen dialogue and intimacy in a community. So thank you so much. And yes, so hopefully we'll have some time for questions and answers. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to put it in the chat as well, and we can respond to those at the end of the webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to invite Barbara Deck, who, as I mentioned, started a Laudato Si Circle just like a couple months ago in Boston, and what she's brought to the circle is the use of something called dyads. And I think it's a nice structure to ensure participation and encourage people to get to know each other and to talk. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Barbara. Great, we can see you.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Okay. No, I can't see you. What should I do?
Just talk. We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, well, I I didn't do PowerPoint, so I made some sheets of paper. Okay, here we are. Here I am. I can see myself now. This will be better. Hi, everybody. We have a relatively new Laudato Si Circle, and we're very, very thrilled with it. And I want to talk about some of the things that we do, because if you're starting a circle, or even if you have a circle already, these may be something that you haven't thought of, but it's a very, very easy way to build community, to give everybody a sense that they can speak, to decrease some of the anxiety that people may have about taking too much time or not taking enough time, etc. So when we started our circle, we followed Christina's suggestion that we start with an outdoor exercise. As she described it, it's called Linger, Listen, Love. So what we do in our circle is we get together and then I review, here's what we're going to do for Linger, Listen, and Love. And we all go outside on a hot day, a cold day, it doesn't make any difference. We go outside and walk around. Our circle meets on the grounds of Boston College. So a lot of people have had the experience by now of whatever plant or tree we lingered with the first time that we're with, we'll go and revisit just to check in with our new friend. So we have about 6 minutes doing that. And what Christina did the first time, she did a wolf howl to summon us back. So now we do a wolf howl. So we come back together again. But I would say that those 6 minutes of outdoor meditation are very, very profound. They put us in touch with the fact that we are part of the universe, that we do love creation, and it changes our feeling about ourself, and also brings us together, even though we're having these individual experiences, because we know that we're doing it as a group. It changes our experience of what's happening. So we start with an opening circle. We start with a prayer, and then we have an opening circle. And I think Vivek also discussed something like this, where we will check in with each other. So people will talk about their week, especially with regard to these issues and this Laudato Si consciousness, and also what our Linger, Listen, Love experience was like. And it's always, it's always a little bit different, but it's a good way to reconnect and to make sure that every single person's voice is heard. And I think we've modeled that it's not long, but it's very meaningful. What we've done in our group is, and I think it works very, very well, is we have a chapter summary from Laudato Si. And what we've been doing is rotating I will call it the chapter leader. So I did it the first time when Christina was in the group, and I will, my favorite spots, I will repeat them, talk about them a little bit. And one of the things I would like to see, and then every week it's been a different person. So I just want to put in a plug for that also. What that has done is I can see that it has developed the confidence of every person who does that and leads a chapter. It also makes us feel that every single person in the group is able to speak. They get a lot of appreciation, and it builds their confidence as somebody who's really made this their own, and they're able to talk about it. Okay, now, what is this mysterious dyad? It's very simple, and it's very powerful. And we've been doing it since the beginning. So I would, and you can do it at any time, figure out how you want to do it in your group. What we did was, when I was summarizing the first chapter, I got to the end of section 1. Here's chapter 1. What is happening to our common home? Here's my highlighting and so on. And I got to the end of the first section, and we did what is called a dyad. I call it a reflection dyad. And it was very simple. I said, okay, you know, a fundamental principle of good learning theory is that you need to speak in order to learn. And there's a way in which this is so profound, so beautiful, and so complex that I realized it's easy to read it and then you just kind of glaze over. Or even easy to listen to somebody talk about what's happening and then you sort of glaze over like, oh my God, you know, we're in such trouble, such terrible things are happening. This is so beautiful. I'm called to do this and that. What am I called to do, et cetera, et cetera. So we decided to form dyads. Very, very simple. So what I did as a leader, because it's much easier that way, I paired people up. I said, all right, you know, Barbara and Craig, Christina and Kathy, Bob and Jim, or whoever it was that we had, get together. And what we are going to do is you're going to take turns listening to each other for 2 minutes each. And there's two distinct roles. There's the listener and the speaker. So the instructions for the listener are to listen with respect, with expectation, and with delight. So you're basically there simply to listen. You're not going to comment, you're not going to advise, you're not going to critique. And you look delighted, like, wow, this is great. I am listening to you, whatever it is that you want to say. The person who is speaking, the speaker, can use that time however they wish. So you can say, what did I just hear? You know, out of all the things that the person who was summarizing the chapter was saying, what struck me? What did I hear? So that's one way to do it. Or you can, you know, pick up your book and review that section yourself. Oh, you know, the digital world becomes omnipresent and can stop people from learning how to live wisely, think deeply, and love generously. So it's an opportunity to review for yourself and say something out loud. It's also an opportunity to talk about how you feel. It really is open to how you want to use that person's attention for those 2 minutes. But what it does is it gives you a chance to have 2 minutes for yourself to speak without feeling that you are on the spot. You don't have to say anything profound. Nobody is judging you. It's really for you. And then what we'll do after 2 minutes, and I have my, I use my phone for a timer. After 2 minutes, I have a little chime or a whatever it is that my sound is. I have a nice Tibetan bell. I'll say, okay, please switch roles. And then people will switch roles. And the person who was the listener is now the speaker. The person who was the speaker is now the listener. And then we'll do that for 2 minutes each. And it's not a lot of time, but it really makes a big difference. Then we'll have the chapter leader, if you want to refer to the person as that, will summarize the next section of the chapter, and then we'll do another dyad. And what I like to do, and it works very well, it takes the awkwardness out of the situation of people picking who it is that they're going to pair up with. I will just reassign people. So if I was with this person this time, this person this time, I'm going to go this way. And then after that, I'll go across the circle. So you can just think about it, and you want to do it so that you form as many different dyad combinations as you can over the course of doing the chapter. Or you could use dyads at any point. If you're not going through Laudato Si chapter by chapter in your group, if somebody does a presentation, you can say, okay, now we're going to have a dyad. What happens for us anyway, so this is just our experience, and it's a very, I think it's a simple and effective model. By the time that we have gotten through the chapter, we have probably had maybe 2, 3, 4 dyads, and people have had a chance to actually listen to and experience somebody else in a way that feels very safe. So that's what we do with our dyads. And I had some points that I wanted to make. It allows us to talk, to connect. It builds community. It allows us to process difficult information. And people feel very good about themselves. The next thing that we do, I'm calling a think and listen. So it's not a dyad, it's the whole group, and you can do this or not do this. What I do is time and let everybody have 2 minutes each to speak. So you may think that it's awkward, but actually it's not awkward. What it does is it creates a very safe, protected space for each person to, people have talked about their lives, what they're doing, etc. And then probably I should wrap up. Then what we always will do some housekeeping. Who's going to lead the next chapter? When and where are we going to meet? And then we'll have a closing circle. So again, in our the way that we do things, everybody gets a chance to speak. And I like what we do, so I'll just tell you what we do. People will do a highlight, what's been a highlight of the group tonight, a next step, and we appreciate the person on the right or the left, however it is we go around the circle. But again, it's all about building community. And I can see that it's a structure that works for us. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say, if you have this kind of structure, it's very easy to add new people to the group. So we had a new person come to our group 2 weeks ago. Last night we had 2 new people come to our group. And instead of feeling that there's people who already know each other and what is this new person going to do, just by having the structure of taking turns, it's easy for them to step in. They have a turn just like everybody else. So that's it. That's what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And having experienced the structure firsthand, I can attest that it works, it builds community, and it makes things very dynamic and engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And so thanks for sharing this. And I'll note that on our Laudato Si Circle website, Barbara had written a little article that explains this process. So you also have that as a resource, and I'll share that at the end. So again, big thanks, Barbara, for sharing the structure and how much the circle has grown over such a short amount of time. So I love that Vivek comes from like 4 or 5 years of experience, and Barbara has here 2 months with the circle. So it shows the spectrum.
We just did chapter 4. We've had our 4th meeting.
But it's great. So now we have a couple of minutes in case there's any questions for any of the speakers. So if you have a question, if you don't mind, if you want to put it in the chat, and we'll answer. So any questions? So any questions? And I think what's interesting is so recommendations as to meeting frequency. So Barbara or Vivek, any of you want to share?
Well, what we've been meeting every 2 weeks. That's what we've been doing. And I don't know what's going to happen when we're finished. What's been happening when people talk about next steps, a lot of people now have next steps, or they say, I'm getting to the point of thinking of a next step. So I think we're probably going to want to stay together, and we'll have to think about how we're going to deal with things. I think even though we've read this through once, it's a fantastic guide, and we'll probably just do it again.
Vivek, do you want to also share how often you all meet?
Yeah, we meet once a month for a scheduled meeting. And then there could be other days, depending on what events are happening around the world or in the liturgical calendar. So we would also meet to celebrate, let's say, the days of solstice and equinox, Francis of Assisi, the 1st of September. No, so there would be dates to that we would meet that would not fit with once a month regular meetings. So that's where we are. Yeah. And we have a large group and we have another smaller group. So it depends how they meet. Yeah.
Can you share how big your groups are?
We have people who are on vacation. I think when they come back from vacation, we'll probably have about somewhere between 8 and 10 people at this point. It's grown.
Yeah, we've about 6, 7. That's about the number, 6 or 7. Yeah.
And then there's a question here from Lorraine. Do you have actions related to the chapter? So Lorraine, just to clarify, you mean, do these circles engage in action? Is that the question?
If that's the question, we have done a few, let's say, actions. One is we would participate in any national gathering that deals with the environment. We have organized days to raise awareness about climate justice for families, not for, so we've engaged with children and families with children. And so we would have other events. So we've been doing, for example, celebrating Good Friday, in the whole light of ecological spirituality. How does Good Friday now have meaning for us? So we would have a whole day of reflection on Good Friday. And we began with a group of about 30 people. This year we had close to 100 people.
Wow, great.
For those days of reflection. Yeah.
I think, we're just starting, but there's an overlap between our Laudato Si Circle and the Green Group at St. Ignatius, which is the parish of Boston College where we're meeting. So, and the Green Group is taking some action. So we're organizing a forum that's going to be happening as part of the season of creation, also to help educate people about the global climate strike on September 20th. And the other thing that's happening in our group is we're having people join from other parishes in the Archdiocese. Actually, they want to start Laudato Si circles in their parishes, so they're coming to us to learn. I don't even know if I had a chance to tell Christina about that, but that's what's happening.
That's great. Okay, so, and I see, Chris, you have a question. Are all Laudato Si Circle members certified animators? And no, I was, at least in Boston, I don't think any of the members are animators. So,
either.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to just I just made this connection that Vivek and Barbara, you're connected in some way, because Barbara came to the Green Team because of Lorna Gold's talk at Boston College, and Vivek and Lorna Gold have been working together for years.
Oh my God, that's great.
So it's a really fun connection. Okay, great. So I just want to share some resources as we close, and one is just the Laudato Si Circle website, which I mentioned, and on that website you can find, again, the article, the blog that Barbara wrote that outlines the meeting structure that is done in Boston. There's also examples of other meetings. So I know we have Katie Hirschbach here from Arizona, and she put together a beautiful PowerPoint of how they've done their circles in Arizona. So that resource is there as well, in case you're curious about different agendas and how people do things. There's also the Laudato Si Retreats Facilitator Guide, which has a lot of exercises. So the exercise that Barbara mentioned about linger, listen, and love is in that guide. And there's also other exercises of how to incorporate sharing and dialogue and contemplative prayer. So that's another good resource. And then the third thing I just wanted to mention is that we're going to have a call for all the Laudato Si Circle leaders. This is something that's going to happen quarterly. And so it's not a webinar, but just it'll be like a conference call.
That's great.
Where if you lead a circle, it'll be a chance to share how things are going, to reflect on any learnings, and also to pose questions. The idea is to create community among our circle leaders around the globe. And so it's going to happen, I think it's next week. So the details are on the Laudato Si Circle website, because unlike the webinar, you don't need to sign up. You just click on the link. So hopefully all of you, if you're a circle leader, you're already part of the Google group for circle leaders, because that's also a way to communicate with other leaders and share what you're doing. So for instance, there's been a wonderful prayer service on Fridays and pray Prague, and this wonderful, wonderful communication. So I want to, again, we're going to close, we're past the hour, and I want to again thank Vivek and Barbara for their wonderful sharings. I think what you offered is really important as a way to help all of us as we facilitate circles, as new tools that we can incorporate to encourage dialogue and community. So again, big thanks for your time and the time you took to share and to present. And so we're going to close in prayer. And so what we'll do is I'm going to ask actually Barbara and Vivek if you can join me. So I'll read a section, and then Vivek, maybe you can read the next section and then stop, and then Barbara, you can finish it.
Sure.
Okay. And this is a prayer, hopefully that you all are familiar with, from Laudato Si. So again, thank you all for joining us, and we'll close now as we begin, remembering we're in the presence of our Creator.
Mm-hmm.
All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. Vivek?
O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it. That we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction.
Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace.
Amen.
Amen.
So thank you all. Again, thank you, Barbara and Vivek. And blessings to you all, whether you're now entering your evening, your morning, or your day. And we look forward to staying in touch, and we'll be praying for each other as we develop our Laudato circles and bring Laudato Si to life for our crying common home. So God bless everybody, and please stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Christina.
Bye, Christina. Thank you.
Bye.